Everybody for coming for this today. This is one of the TOEFL workshops that we've been working on, and today what I wanted to do was go a little more in-depth into each of the sections. We've had an overview that Aaron presented for the first workshop. Then we had our model lessons from the Korean teachers and the native teachers. And today what this presentation is a summary of the ETS TOEFL web seminars. It comes directly from the company that makes the TOEFL. Each seminar is about an hour long, so hopefully all of the information from that I've squeezed down into half an hour. Here's the website, and all the information is in the workshop packets that you have. So if you want to look this up, if you want to watch the seminars on your own, they're a good resource. It's actually the best thing that I found online. I looked for a lot of different courses. Most of the courses available are for students taking the TOEFL, which makes sense. But there are not a lot of courses for teachers that are teaching the TOEFL. So the ETS website, I think, is the best resource for that. I have two other materials that we're going to use today as we go through. These two here are the speaking and the writing rubrics, the score sheets that the evaluators use for the TOEFL. And I wanted to hand these out because these are important for the students, especially in the higher levels. I asked the Nochiwan students last term in intensives if they'd ever seen these before, and they had not. So for your PA classes and your, if you do teach Nochiwan, these are good tools to give the students and to ensure that they understand how the answers are scored. One of the things about the TOEFL test is that the more you know how the test works, the better you can do on it. So when we get our students up to the higher levels and they're ready to take the test, the more familiar they are, hopefully the higher score they can get. And then I also included a feedback worksheet. So hopefully, as we go through each section, you can fill in these boxes here with new things that you might learn for each of the sections here: speaking, listening, reading, writing, and then what ideas that you found useful in the presentation. And at the bottom, what do you think could be improved? If there's something that I didn't touch on, if you have questions. What I'd like to do is be able to take this feedback and modify the presentation and use it again if we have new teachers coming in, or if we all just want a resource to use for TOEFL. And if you want to, there are no names at the top, so it's anonymous. If you want to write anything down, that's fine. I won't know who it is. If at the bottom you want to write down Mark teacher is very handsome, we should buy him a present, that's okay too. All right? Okay, so let's get started. As I said, this is a summary of all the information, so we'll start with an overview of how the presentation will work. And we'll do a brief review of each section. We've spent a lot of time on these sections. We teach them every day, so we don't need to review too much. Some scoring and student performance groups for each of the sections, just to give us an idea of what the scores are, where our students fall. One of the most useful, I think, is the common student problems. There are a few for each section that we can reference and use in our own lessons with our materials to boost their performance. And then I came up with two categories for each. They're based off the seminars, but I kind of added a few ideas and rearranged them a little bit. So it's the SSS and the TTT. The student strategies for success, things that our students can work on that we can inform them that they should practice at home, in class, and then teacher techniques for TOEFL. And that's what this presentation is more about, is a few things that we can do. Now, there are a lot of different ideas. We might all have different teaching styles. There are a few activities that I've listed in here that we could use with the Avalon material that we have. There are a few activities that we could use if we have some free time, which doesn't happen very much, right? But just a few suggestions. There are also some more resources, online resources for listening websites, for reading websites, and for writing websites, for grammar, that you might want to reference, and those are listed on the last page of the presentation. So the main ideas and the goals today are to give us a more complete teacher knowledge of all sections of the test. The TOEFL is an integrated test. The information and the skills that you use in one section are applicable in another. Okay? It's actually one of the better standardized tests out there because it tests a wide range of what students will need to succeed in a university if they study abroad or in a job that they need to speak English. So if we have a complete knowledge of how the test works, we can do things in each other's classes that will help. It's also to focus on specific skills improvements and an integration of skills in all Avalon classes. So if we know what students have problems with, there are some statistics here of the biggest problems students have, then we can work in our individual classes and with our co-teachers to say, okay, this week we worked on paraphrasing. What did you do? Did you do paraphrasing in your class? Okay, so we can coordinate a little bit more and really hit a couple of different topics. And then options for further teacher development. And those are more the websites and a few of the activities. Okay, so common skills to focus on. I have a few here. I think there's 8 or 9 skills here. And what I've done is the skills in yellow are the 5 skills that you'll see again and again in each different section. And we'll hit on those. And I think that these are the 5 most important ones as a staff that we can focus on in our classes. Note-taking, context and collocation, understanding a word by what is around it in the sentence. Summarizing and paraphrasing, we've discussed those before. They're critical to success on the TOEFL. Time management is a good one to work on in class. But this next one here, academic experiences. I've been asking a lot of my students, they're middle school students, getting ready to take the TOEFL. They still have to go through high school. They have not even thought about university yet. The TOEFL is based on language that you would use as a first-year university student. That's why language in the TOEFL is such a problem for our students, because they're not at that level yet. One of the other problems that they have is they've never lived in a dormitory. They've never eaten in a cafeteria with a bunch of students. They've never stayed up late drinking beer and have to take a test in the morning. They don't know anything about university life. So we as teachers, if occasionally we can give them some of that information, if there's a question about a university dormitory policy, we can explain, okay, this is why this happens. When I lived in a dormitory, we needed to have a curfew or damage deposits or anything that you can think of to better explain how a university works. That will help them on the TOEFL. And then the scoring rubrics and the test mechanics. So not only are we teaching them English, but especially in the higher levels, we're teaching them how to take this test. And if they know more about it, they'll do better. And then this last one here is a new idea that I got out of the presentations, the web seminars, is a vocabulary log. And that's something that we can discuss as a staff if we want to implement it. It's similar to the Power Voca that we use in CHAMP, but it is a classroom-created vocabulary log. So basically the students, at the beginning of every class, have a little notebook that they would open up to that day's page, and as you go through the information in, say, a reading class, every time you hit a new vocabulary word, they write it down. Now, the teacher can give definitions for those words, or it could be part of homework for the students to look them up. That would be something that we can discuss if we think it's a good idea to use. My opinion is that if students are actually physically writing something down, it has a better tendency to stick in their brain. And that way we're building a larger academic lexicon, vocabulary that the students can refer to as they study. Okay, so let's get started with speaking. Right? With speaking, just a quick overview. It's 20 minutes, 6 tasks. There's 2 independent, 4 integrated questions. And then there's generally 3 types of questions within those 6 tasks. There's speaking about familiar topics, campus situations, and academic course content. The scoring rubric is 0 to 4 per question, and then that turns into a 0 to 30 as a converted score for the whole section. The major scoring criteria, and we also have our rubrics that you can take a look at after the presentation. Okay, these are the very detailed rubrics that all the examiners are very familiar with and they use to get the baseline score. But the main points that they're looking for are delivery, language use, and topic development. The most challenging for students, the 2 questions that have the biggest problems on are question type 4 and question type 6. Okay? 4 is the general to specific question, where they have to synthesize knowledge from the reading and from the listening and explain how they relate. It's tricky. And then question 6 is the full listening question. That's all they have. It's just they listen to a lecture and then they have to respond to the question prompt. It's a long lecture. They're usually 2.5 to 3 minutes long. There we go. Okay. So some student strategies for success. The first one is to understand the task and speaking scoring rubric. Understanding the task is what we do in the lower levels. PB classes are great for that, just to get them familiar and remember what they're looking for in every question. Speaking scoring rubrics, I think, are more appropriate for the higher level before they're taking the tests, so they can really understand, how am I answering this question to get a higher score? A big one is to use outlines to prepare responses. Students don't like writing outlines in any class. That's what I've found. They think it's extra work. But if we can reinforce to them that outlines are actually going to make their answers better and it will make it easier, then that's going to help. So outlines is something to focus on. A new idea that I found was to practice writing out responses, especially in lower levels. A lot of times the students can be shy about answering questions, especially with their peers in the class. So if you have them write out an answer first, it can help them organize their thoughts. And then they go through and speak, and you can build off of that throughout the term. Next one, practice, practice, practice. And that's what we do. We want to make sure that our practice is guided practice, and that every time we're doing a question, we're trying to hit a couple of skills that the students can reinforce. And this next one I think is also important, and hopefully we can talk about this as a staff and do more of this, and that's recording. If we have our students record and evaluate their answers in class with a little tape recorder or a microphone, it will get them more used to listening to their own voices. Some students are very soft-spoken, and they need to project. They need to be able to speak clearly and loudly. And then one of the things they suggested to do is, after everyone has gone through, if you pick, say, 5 students to do a spoken response, the 5 students go through, you discuss it as a class, and then those 5 students would actually re-record another answer. And the thought being that the second answer would be better, hopefully. And then the last one, this is a big one because it comes up, and I think it will help for all of us to reinforce this in our classes, is the 5 W's. Who, what, when, where, and why. This should be the cornerstone of our note-taking. For any of the reading passages that we read, any of the listening, if we can hammer this into our students, always remember the 5 W's, it will automatically give them the main ideas, the important details of anything that they're working on. And I think it's difficult for students to listen to a full passage and pick out the key ideas. But if we start with this, that's going to help them. Okay? Who is an easy question to answer. When is an easy question to answer. And if we start them focusing on the information around those answers, they'll have a better chance of getting the main ideas. Okay, so here are some teaching techniques. Introducing each task by brainstorming and modeling a group answer. This can also be a good warm-up activity. I try to do this in my speaking classes where I'll go through an answer first, even giving a model answer myself, or having the students come up with one together. Working on signal words and functional language for each task. Signal words that will introduce a different paragraph in a lecture, things like that. Discussing university campus life and explaining common ideas and language to students. Words like registrar, for when they are registering for courses. I didn't know what a registrar was when I went to university. I had no idea. It's where you register for your courses, where you pay your bills for school. Next one is always note-taking instruction. And this is something to remember. Even if you have a high-level class, they still need work on note-taking. So what I try to do is work on note-taking in almost every class. Even if it's a short amount, hitting one specific thing, note-taking skills are another cornerstone of the TOEFL. And then vocabulary instruction with context lessons. Context is one of the other cornerstones. If the language for the TOEFL is based on first-year university, and we're teaching middle school students, the one biggest skill that's going to help them with their vocabulary is context. And it's a difficult skill because it involves some higher thinking. It involves asking questions about how sentences work and how the words play a role in the sentence. So we can do more with context in each of our classes. We can do exercises by taking a word out of a sentence and having the students guess what it should be. Things like that. Having students create their own sentences and then mix them up. We do this in CHAM, but we don't do something like that in IB. If we had a more complex sentence that's scrambled up, it's going to help them with their grammar and sentence structure and figuring out what words mean by where they are in the sentence or paragraph. Okay, common questions. I'm going long. Common questions. Are students penalized for having only one reason in an independent task answer? So they're supposed to have two answers in the independent. That's the opinion question. And the answer is no. From the TOEFL test people, from ETS, they say no, they won't be penalized. But it needs to be one very well-developed answer. So I've started telling my students this: if you're stuck, if you can only think of one answer, make it a good one. And then don't worry about it. And finish your question and get out of the task. Instead of going, just keep working on the one that you know that you can talk about. And then the last one, are students penalized if they run out of time? The answer for this is also no, as long as the answer is mostly completed, if they've hit key points and some details. If they run out of time, that's okay. The same goes if they are slightly early. If they finish and they have 5 seconds left on the clock, we should not encourage the students to start speaking more slowly, because that's not going to help. That'll actually make their score go down. Okay, so that is speaking. Let's move on to listening. With listening, it's 60 to 90 minutes. The scoring scale is 0 to 30. There is no rubric for listening or for reading because they are either multiple choice questions or there's an answer that they're looking for. Okay? The way the score profiles go is at a low score, 0 to 13, intermediate 14 to 21, and high is 22 to 30. The main difficulties in listening are the pace of listening. Okay? When native speakers talk, it's the same thing that I find with Korean. Somebody's speaking Korean, and I know that word. I know that word. And they've already said 100 words, and I only got 2. It's the same thing with our students. So there are ways that we can work on boosting those skills, the listening skills, and then also the length. You know, they're teenagers. If you give them a lecture about astronomy and stars and science, they don't care. They're bored. They're bored. So there are ways that we can break up our listening exercises, even the ones that we have in our books, to use our own curriculum in a more effective way to train the students to get, you know, a little bit longer each time, and then hopefully they can make it all the way through. So there's two types, just a quick review. There's academic, 4 to 6 lectures, 3 to 5 minutes each. There are different subjects that are academic. And then there are informal conversations back and forth between two people.